My name is Clara Hayes. At 35, I was the head of a tech company that was quietly changing the world, a secret I carefully guarded from the people who should have been proudest of me, my own family. I was pulling into the driveway of the house where I grew up, for the first time in 5 long years, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The annual Christmas dinner was a tradition I tried to avoid. My father, Arthur, had always made it clear that his empire, and everything associated with it, was destined for my brothers, Ethan and Mark. But even I wasn't prepared for what he would announce at the dinner table. So, when he declared in front of the entire family that he was officially writing me out of his will, I didn't make a scene. I just calmly picked up my fork and continued to eat. They had no idea that the woman they had just disinherited possessed a power they couldn't even imagine. If you've ever been underestimated, you'll definitely want to see what happened next. So please, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. You are about to witness a family dinner that turned into a decisive move in a power game. I grew up in Maple Creek, a sleepy town in Ohio where everyone knew each other. Our large house on Pine Street was a symbol of success. It silently proclaimed that our family had made something of itself. The center of our world was my father, Arthur, a man who built his manufacturing empire from the ground up. He was the undisputed head of the family, and he considered his business the most important legacy he would leave behind. This legacy was to be inherited by 2 successors, my brothers. Ethan, who was just 2 years older than me, was groomed from childhood to be the brains of the company. He was a genius in finance and strategy. And Mark, 3 years younger, was meant to be its face. His charisma and charm could win anyone over. And who was I? I was the flaw in his perfect plan. I was just the daughter. From a young age, I heard the same thing: business is a man's world, Clara. There's no place for someone like you here, he'd say, making it clear that my only goal was to find a good husband. His views on life seemed hopelessly stuck in the past. My mother, Eleanor, saw all of this and would only cast sympathetic glances my way. She was his loyal companion, but a companion without a voice, always one step behind her powerful husband, but never his equal. While my family's world revolved around factory floors and accounting reports, I found my home in another universe, the school computer lab. It was my sanctuary. There, amidst the humming monitors, my teacher, Miss Albright, opened up the world of code to me. While my brothers were learning the art of the handshake at business dinners, I was learning to write the future. You have a real gift, Clara, she told me in my senior year. Technology is what will rule the world, and you can be one of the people who builds it. Her words inspired me. I set my sights on MIT. It wasn't just a university, it was a ticket to Boston, to a world of cutting-edge technology, as far away as possible from my father's manufacturing business. When I received the coveted acceptance letter, my joy knew no bounds. But my father didn't share it. MIT? On the other side of the country? Don't make me laugh, he scoffed. Everything you need is right here in Ohio. Do you have any idea how much that costs? I knew the price, but I had hoped for help. After being denied the last major scholarship, I mustered the courage to enter his study. It was his fortress, dark wood, the smell of expensive cigars, and a massive desk behind which he sat like a judge. He listened to me and then delivered his verdict. The family's money will go to Ethan's and Mark's education, he said sharply. Their degrees are an investment in the company's future. Your little computer hobby is just that, a hobby. It's not a hobby, it's my life. I tried to argue. He looked up from his papers, his gaze colder than steel. Then find a way to pay for your life yourself. He went back to his documents, making it clear the conversation was over. I deferred my studies for a year, and my life became a relentless marathon. Morning shifts at a diner, afternoons at a retail store, and nights spent doing bookkeeping for small businesses. I lived on coffee and ambition, saving every dollar and taking out student loans. The following fall, I finally walked through the doors of MIT. But it wasn't the finish line, just the start of a new ordeal. My university years were a blur of part-time jobs and sleepless nights. While other students went to parties, I wrote code. During finals, 4 hours of sleep a night felt like a luxury. But I graduated with honors and, more importantly, with an insider's understanding of the tech world. My first step was a tiny startup in Cambridge, right in the heart of Boston's tech hub. The salary was laughable, but I worked shoulder to shoulder with the founders, soaking up their experience like a sponge. I wasn't just an employee, I was an apprentice. And when our company was bought by an industry giant 2 years later, I gained not only my first serious money but also invaluable knowledge. I was ready to start my own game. Meanwhile, in Ohio, my brothers, Ethan and Mark, effortlessly took on executive roles in the family business. Every conversation with my mother was filled with news of their achievements. I was genuinely happy for them, but it was painful to realize how differently our paths were valued in our family. The breaking point came 8 years ago during a visit home. I had just launched my first company, a health tech platform designed to help doctors and patients. We were running on venture capital, and I was pouring my entire being into the project, believing it would change the world. Over a family dinner, my father mockingly asked about my computer hobby. I proudly replied, "We just closed our series of funding round." He waved it off. "That's just a fancy way of spending other people's money. A real business lives off what it earns, not on handouts from investors." Ethan immediately chimed in, "Maybe it's time to come back down to earth, Clara, and do something real? This is real. My technology can save lives." I retorted. My father looked at me with weary disappointment. "When you're done playing entrepreneur in Boston, we'll find a place for you in accounting. Come back to the real world." It was his ultimate favor. The next morning, I left without a word. Our communication nearly ceased after that. Rare calls to my mom, formal holiday cards. They never learned of my success, because they were never interested enough to ask. And now, I was parking a modest, rented Ford Fusion in front of that same house. My own Lucid Air, a next-generation electric car, was sitting in the garage of my Boston home. Arriving in a car that cost more than 3 of these houses would have been too provocative. I was consciously playing the role of the ordinary daughter. The expensive clothes stayed in my suitcase, replaced by simple jeans and a logo-free cashmere sweater. I wanted them to see me, not my money. The only thing that betrayed my real life was the watch on my wrist. It was a personal trophy I'd bought myself the day our service hit 1 million users. But it could always be hidden under a sleeve. This dinner was supposed to be a bridge across the chasm between us. I wanted to give them a chance to know the person I had become without their help and despite their doubts. I had come hoping for a quiet conversation. I could never have imagined that my revelation would cause such a storm. From the outside, the house looked like a Christmas card come to life, exactly as I remembered. Garlands still framed the roof, the same wreath hung on the door, and through the living room window, a decorated tree twinkled with lights. The house felt like a time capsule. For one brief moment, I was a teenager again, about to walk inside to the smell of my mom's holiday cooking. But the moment passed, and I was left standing on the porch, hesitating to ring the bell. 5 years is a lifetime. Would they see the woman I'd become, or just the stubborn girl who left? The door was opened by my mother, Eleanor. Her face lit up with genuine, unfeigned joy. "Clara, you made it," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. The familiar scent of her perfume enveloped me, taking me back to childhood. "Come in, don't stand in the cold. Everyone's already here." And everyone was no exaggeration. The living room was a living portrait from my past, where everyone had their unchanging role. My brothers, Ethan and Mark, stood by the fireplace, drinks in hand. Ethan's wife, Jessica, was adjusting presents under the tree, while Megan, Mark's wife, was chatting animatedly with Aunt Martha. The children, Leo, Mia, and Noah, were gathered on the sofa watching a Christmas movie, oblivious to everyone else. Uncles Frank and James were, as always, absorbed in a football game. The scene was painfully familiar. And at the center of it all, in his old leather armchair, sat my father. He didn't just occupy the room, he was its center of gravity. He had aged, his hair now completely gray, but his commanding posture and sharp, appraising gaze remained the same. "Clara," he said, giving a slight nod. No smile, no hug. Just an acknowledgement of my presence. "Hi, Dad," I replied in the same even tone. "Merry Christmas." Ethan approached first, offering an awkward side hug. "Welcome back, sis. How's Boston treating you?" "It's good," I said curtly. "Still working on that app of yours?" Mark added, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Something like that," I evaded. "Well, the family business is booming," Ethan announced proudly. "We expanded into 3 new states last quarter." "Yeah, Dad put me in charge of all Midwest operations, and I'm handling the key accounts now," Mark chimed in. "Profits are up almost 40%. It was a well-rehearsed performance I'd seen dozens of times, a display of success, a search for fatherly approval, and a reminder to me of my place. I just smiled and said, "Congratulations." "Speaking of business, Clara," my father finally addressed me, "how is your little project coming along?" His tone was pointedly polite, but I heard the condescension in it. Before I could find the right words, my mother gently intervened. "Dinner's almost ready. Clara, could you help me in the kitchen, please?" I gratefully accepted her offer, glad for the chance to escape a difficult conversation. The kitchen, as always, was a haven of warmth, filled with the aroma of roasted turkey and fresh baking. My mom had always been the heart of our home, and her holiday dinner was a masterpiece. "I'm so glad you came," she said, handing me a stack of plates. "Your father won't show it, but he's missed you." I gave a slight nod, though I found that hard to believe. "How are you, Mom?" "Really, how are things?" I asked. She paused for a moment. "It's the same as always. The boys are over often for business, bringing the grandkids." She lowered her voice slightly. "I wish you'd call more often." Her words pricked me with a slight pang of guilt. "Are you happy out there in Boston? Is there someone special in your life?" There was so much genuine care in her voice that I felt a pang of regret for how distant I'd been. "I'm happy, Mom. Work takes up a lot of my time, but I love what I do. No relationship right now, but I'm okay." She squeezed my hand. "As long as you're happy. That's all that matters." Her words warmed me. That was the fundamental difference between my parents. My mother just wanted me to be happy. My father, on the other hand, only understood happiness as a result of success that could be measured in numbers. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, reserved only for special occasions. The antique china and family silver underscored the importance of the moment. I was seated directly across from my father, who presided at the head of the table. Before we began to eat, he said the traditional prayer, thanking God for the family's prosperity and the business's success. My name was not mentioned. The conversation was carefully navigated around any sensitive topics. I talked with my nephews and nieces. Mia and Leo shared news from school. Only Noah, Mark's son, sat engrossed in his smartphone. "What's so interesting in there?" Mark asked him. "Just reading," Noah replied, not looking up from his screen. "Noah, put the phone away," Megan requested. He reluctantly put it away, but I noticed him continuing to do something under the table. Suddenly, Aunt Martha turned to me. "Clara, I hear you've started your own business. Tell us about it." The chatter at the table died down. All eyes were on me, and I felt that familiar urge to make myself smaller, less significant, to avoid drawing attention. "I work in health technology," I answered simply. "We create software that helps doctors." "That sounds wonderful," Aunt Martha said sincerely. "And how is it going?" I could feel my father's intense gaze on me. "We're doing well," I said as neutrally as possible. Ethan interjected, "That's a risky field. Most of those companies depend on constant investor funding and rarely turn a real profit. Stable manufacturing, on the other hand, is a different story." "Exactly," my father added with pride. The family business had a record-breaking quarter. Ethan and Mark are doing an excellent job. And the topic was closed. The conversation instantly shifted to my brother's successes, and my world was once again relegated to somewhere far outside that room. I offered to help my mom and Jessica clear the table. Any excuse to escape the tense atmosphere for a few minutes was welcome. In the kitchen, among the plates, I could finally breathe freely. It was there that Jessica, Ethan's wife, approached me. "Can I ask you something?" she began quietly, as if afraid of being overheard. "What is it like, to have your own company?" "For real?" She gave a sad smile. "Ethan never talks about the work, only the numbers." Her question was the first genuine show of interest I'd received all evening. I decided to be honest. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," I confessed. "Sleepless nights, constant stress, decisions that everything depends on. But when you create something from scratch, something that can change someone's life for the better, that feeling is incomparable." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "I guess that's more meaningful," she said, "than just managing something that was built before you." I wanted to tell her how much her words meant, but my mother peeked into the kitchen. "Girls, it's time for dessert." We returned to the dining room with pies and coffee. And then I saw my father pick up his spoon and lightly tap it against his glass. The traditional signal. He was about to make a speech. The room fell instantly silent. I didn't know it yet, but the words he was about to say would become the point of no return for our entire family. My father rose, and even the crackling of the fire in the hearth seemed to fall silent. He surveyed the polished table, which reflected the candlelight, and all of us gathered around it. He was wearing a dark gray wool vest over a perfectly pressed white shirt, his unofficial uniform for family triumphs. This was his stage, and we were his audience. "I want to say a few words before we move on to dessert," he began, his voice effortlessly filling the space between the heavy velvet curtains. It was the familiar prologue to a performance I knew by heart. "Hayes Industries is showing outstanding results. And I want to personally thank my sons, Ethan and Mark, for their dedication." Ethan, the future CEO, responded with a short, businesslike nod. Mark, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair with the easy smile of a man for whom everything had always come easily. My mother, Eleanor, looked at her husband with a mixture of adoration and a barely perceptible tension in her eyes, as if she was already bracing for his next words. "We haven't just grown, we have conquered," my father said with emphasis. "The acquisition of our main competitor makes us a monopoly in the Midwest market. We are an empire." A wave of appreciative murmurs passed around the table. Uncle Frank theatrically raised his glass. "But any empire needs a clear succession plan, and the years are taking their toll." He allowed himself a small smile, and a brief, obligatory chuckle rippled through the room. But his eyes remained serious. "Therefore, I have had several meetings with our lawyer. Final decisions have been made. They concern both the company and all family assets." The air in the room seemed to grow thicker. I felt a cold wave rise from the pit of my stomach. I took a sip of water, watching the scene unfold. I already suspected where this was going, but for the first time in many years, I was witnessing this family ritual with my own eyes. "When I hand over the reins next year, Ethan will assume the role of CEO," my father announced. His deep understanding of finance and his experience make him the most suitable candidate. Ethan, who had been listening intently, gave a restrained nod, accepting his future role with dignity. "Mark will become president," my father continued. "His talent for connecting with people and opening new markets has already proven to be exceptional." Mark flashed a dazzling smile and raised his glass, thanking his father for the trust placed in him. Together, they are the future of Hayes Industries. They will preserve and multiply the legacy I have spent my entire life building. The table erupted in a wave of congratulations. It was like a carefully staged scene. Aunt Martha gave Ethan a motherly pat on the arm, while Uncle James boisterously slapped Mark on the back in a show of masculine approval. My mother smiled proudly, but I noticed her fingers nervously fiddling with the edge of her napkin as her gaze darted furtively in my direction. She knew there was a second act to this performance. My father waited for the silence. His gaze shifted to me, and the festive atmosphere in the room instantly evaporated. Now, regarding the inheritance, his tone became cold and businesslike. I have revised the will. It must reflect the actual contribution of each person to the well-being of this family. Cold, calculated words. I maintained an icy composure. Therefore, he took a final pause. Ethan and Mark will receive equal shares of the company and will be the primary heirs to all family assets. He stated this firmly, without a hint of doubt, as if reading a financial report. Then he looked directly at me, and his voice, quiet and even, cut through the ensuing silence. Clara, you will not be included in the will. Even though I was prepared for it, his words, spoken in front of the entire family, carried a heavy weight. I could see relatives exchanging anxious glances, their eyes shifting between my father and me, waiting for my reaction. You chose your own path, my father continued in an emotionless tone. Ethan and Mark have dedicated themselves to our common cause, contributing to its growth. Therefore, my decision is just. 5 years ago, those words would have devastated me. I probably would have burst into tears or started arguing, trying to defend my place in the family. But I was no longer the girl who sought his approval. His opinion could no longer hurt me. I understand, I said calmly. Then I picked up my fork and took a bite of apple pie, focusing completely on maintaining my composure. The atmosphere at the table became extremely tense. My mother, Eleanor, had turned pale and was clutching her napkin tightly. Mark looked embarrassed and avoided my gaze, studying his plate. But in Ethan's eyes, I saw a glint of satisfaction. In the icy silence that had fallen over the table, Aunt Martha's voice sounded surprisingly bold. Arthur, do you really think this is the right time for such conversations? She was appealing to his sense of decency, not understanding that he had long been guided only by a sense of power. This is precisely the right time, my father retorted, settling back into his seat. The family needs to be kept informed. He cut off any further objections with a wave of his hand. And now, dessert. The conversation at the table resumed, but it was lifeless, just empty, formal phrases. I sat among them, feeling like an invisible guest in my own home, and felt their gazes on me, a mixture of pity and awkward curiosity. I focused on the taste of the apple pie melting on my tongue. It was the only real thing I felt at that moment. And in my mind, scenes from the past came to life, one after another. There I was, a teenager, being denied help. There was my dream, contemptuously called a hobby. There was a little girl, vainly waiting for praise that was reserved only for her brothers. But something strange happened. Looking at these familiar pictures, I realized that the old, familiar pain was beginning to fade. In its place, a crystal-clear calm emerged. The entire struggle for his approval, for a place in his world, it was all in the past. I was free. He had disinherited me from a legacy of bricks and money. He had no idea that my real inheritance was freedom. And I had created it myself. The quiet voice of my niece, Mia, brought me out of my reverie. Aunt Clara, are you okay? She asked with genuine concern. I gave her a warm smile. I'm fine, sweetie. It's just that things aren't always simple with adults. She nodded wisely. I understand. Grandpa Arthur can be very insistent. Meanwhile, the awkward moment at the table had been smoothed over with a stream of conversation about holiday plans. I barely participated, exchanging glances with my mother. There was anxiety in her eyes, and in my smile, a promise that I would be fine. I was already wondering how soon I could leave when it happened. Noah, who had been glued to his phone the whole time, suddenly gasped loudly. His reaction was so unexpected that all conversations stopped. Every eye in the room was now fixed on him. No one at that moment could have imagined that his next words would turn their world upside down. This is incredible. Aunt Clara, she's on the Forbes list. Noah's voice broke with astonishment, his eyes glued to his smartphone screen. A second wave of silence washed over the room, this one thick and viscous, filled with shock and utter bewilderment. Noah, What nonsense are you talking about? Mark asked sharply, scowling at his son. Obviously, it's just a name coincidence, Ethan said condescendingly. The magazine just released its annual ranking today, so he probably just saw someone with the same last name. But Noah shook his head furiously. No, it's her. Look for yourselves. He turned his phone screen towards the table for everyone to see. It has her picture, her name, everything matches. My heart dropped. The secret I had guarded for years was out. I knew Forbes had published its list this very morning. And my PR team had warned me that, despite all requests for privacy, my name would be on it. The merger deal for my company had closed last month. I knew the numbers and my name were now public. Those were the terms. Give me that, my father rasped, holding out his hand. The authority was gone from his voice, replaced by demanding disbelief. Noah silently stood up and, as if in a ceremony, carried his phone across the room to his grandfather. I watched my father. At first, his face showed skepticism. He was clearly looking for a mistake. Then his brows furrowed as he saw my photo. And then I saw the color drain from his face. He stared at the numbers on the screen, his lips moving silently, repeating them. The domineering patriarch who had sat in that chair a minute ago had vanished. In his place was a confused, stunned man. He lifted his eyes to me, his voice barely a whisper. It says here that your net worth is $1 billion. He swallowed hard. That you founded a company called Aura Health AI and that it was just acquired by Nexus Corporation. In that moment, every gaze in the room, curious, shocked, envious, converged on me. It felt as if even the fire in the hearth had frozen. I took a deep, slow breath, feeling my strength return. The moment of truth had arrived. Yes, Dad, I said quietly but firmly. It's all true. My confirmation detonated in the room. Questions erupted from all sides, blending into a single, continuous hum of disbelief. $4 billion? How? Why did you keep it a secret? So all this time. I raised my hand, without saying a word. And, to my astonishment, the noise subsided. All eyes were on me again. I thought with bitter irony that, apparently, in this house, respect could be bought. And its price was $4.1 billion. I founded Aura Health AI 5 years ago, I began in a steady voice. We created an artificial intelligence system that helps doctors diagnose and treat the most complex diseases. A month ago, we were acquired by Nexus Corporation. But, Clara, why? My mother, Eleanor's, voice was soft and lost. It held no greed, only the pain of alienation. I looked at her, and my gaze softened. Mom, I wanted you to value me, not my accomplishments. 5 years ago, when I left, I realized that my path and my dreams meant nothing here. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I needed to build my life away from here, without anyone's help. I needed to prove to myself, and only to myself, that I was worth something on my own terms. Ethan's face turned a noticeable shade of red from a mixture of shock and frustration. So, he asked tensely, all this time we thought you were struggling with some small project, you were becoming a billionaire without our knowledge? It didn't happen overnight, I replied evenly. The first 3 years were a real fight for survival. We were on the brink of failure twice. I lived in a tiny apartment and invested everything I had back into the company. The breakthrough came only after our algorithm helped diagnose a rare disease that had stumped specialists. That's when hospitals started to trust us. But you could have told us, my father said, and for the first time, I heard a note of hurt in his voice. We would have supported you. I looked directly at him. Really, Dad? Are you sure? I asked, not with defiance, but as a statement of fact. You always made it clear that the only business that mattered was Hayes Industries. And the only right path was the one Ethan and Mark chose. A heavy silence hung in the room. No one had a counterargument to that truth. In the ensuing silence, the question from Megan, Mark's wife, was a welcome interruption, giving everyone a chance to breathe. "Clara, could you tell us a little about your company?" I was genuinely grateful to her for the opportunity. "Of course," I began, trying to speak simply. "Our program, Aura Health AI, is like a very smart assistant for a doctor. It processes vast amounts of data, lab results, research papers, patient histories, to find patterns that aren't always obvious. It helps doctors in complex fields like cardiology and oncology. We currently partner with over 2,000 hospitals worldwide." I could see the surprise on my family's faces turning into understanding. This was a completely different world, far from their familiar business. "That's just incredible, Clara," Mark said quietly, and for the first time, there was genuine respect in his voice. "So that's what you were looking at on your phone?" Megan exclaimed, looking at Noah. He nodded enthusiastically. "I was doing a report on artificial intelligence and read about Aura Health AI," he explained with excitement. "I had no idea Aunt Clara founded it. And then this morning, they announced the big deal with Nexus Corp, and her name was all over the news. Forbes updated their list almost immediately. 4.1 billion. My father repeated, almost in a whisper, staring into space. "And I just told you that you would be left without an inheritance." The irony of the moment was lost on no one in the room. An awkward silence followed, broken by a few restrained coughs. I allowed myself a faint smile. "I think I'll manage," I said, and those words broke the tension. In that moment, I felt the balance of power at the table shift. But Ethan, it seemed, had already adapted to the new reality. A businesslike interest sparked in his eyes. "Clara, this opens up new horizons. We should discuss how your technologies could help our manufacturing." "Give her a break, Ethan," Aunt Martha stopped him, gently but firmly. She looked at me with a warmth and understanding I hadn't felt in years. "I'm sure Clara has other things on her mind right now." Tears glistened in my mother's eyes. "I'm so proud of you, darling," she whispered. "I always believed you would achieve something great." Always, a cynical thought flashed through my mind. Or did this pride only appear today, along with the news of billions? But I pushed the thought away. For now, I was grateful even for this. The silence was once again broken by my nephew, Leo, with the directness only a child can possess. "Aunt Clara, why did you drive here in an old Ford if you have so much money?" The question was so disarming that I couldn't help but laugh, for the first time that evening, genuinely. "Because I didn't want you to look at me differently," I answered honestly. "I just wanted to come as Clara, not as..." I paused, searching for the right word. "Not as the Forbes list," Mark finished for me with a wry smile. Well, that plan failed. For the first time that night, there was humor in his voice, not sarcasm, and it felt like a small step toward reconciliation. The atmosphere in the room had changed noticeably. My father, the former center of attention, now seemed quiet and contemplative. Ethan was clearly deep in thought, his gaze focused and calculating. Mark, on the other hand, looked at me with genuine interest, as if he were truly getting to know me for the first time. But what pleased me most was the reaction of my nieces and nephews. Mia looked at me with undisguised admiration. Leo and Noah started asking me questions about technology and how companies are built, and their words were filled with genuine interest. Gradually, the evening took a new course. I became the center of attention, surrounded by relatives, and I told them how it all began, the struggles, the belief in my idea, the first successes, and the key research that changed everything. Throughout it all, my father sat silently in his armchair, listening intently. I tried to understand what he was thinking. What was hidden behind his silence? Sincere regret? Or calculations about how my success would affect the future of his company? I didn't know the answer. But I knew one thing for sure: money can't fix the mistakes of the past. That requires something much greater: openness, understanding, and a willingness to change. When I finished answering another question from Uncle James, I saw my father get up and head toward his study. At the door, he paused and, meeting my gaze, gave a slight nod. It was an invitation without words. It was time for a conversation we had postponed for far too long. The dining room was buzzing like a beehive. The tension had evaporated, replaced by an excited curiosity. Relatives who had barely looked my way an hour ago were now competing to talk to me, asking about my company and my life in Boston. As I headed toward the study, Ethan intercepted me. "Clara, we definitely need to talk." His tone had become ingratiating. "I was just thinking, your technologies, artificial intelligence, it could completely revolutionize our manufacturing." "Perhaps, but not now, Ethan," I replied gently but firmly. "Dad is waiting for me." Yes, of course," he agreed hastily. "But we must find time to discuss strategy. You understand?" I just gave a noncommittal smile and walked on, toward my father's study. How many times in childhood had I walked down this same hallway, my heart sinking with fear? This study was his sanctuary, a place where I was summoned for reprimands and lectures. But today was different. I was not opening this door as a guilty daughter awaiting judgment. I was walking through it as an equal. Perhaps for the first time in my life. The study was an exact replica of my memories, a veritable monument to my father's values. The walls were lined with business books, and the shelves held photographs, entire altars dedicated to Ethan's and Mark's successes. I was barely in any of them. Behind the massive desk, where he had once seemed omnipotent to me, sat my father. But now he looked lost. "Close the door," he said. A faint echo of his former authority was in his voice, but nothing more. I closed the door and sat in the chair opposite him, crossing one leg over the other. I was not going to speak first. "You wanted to see me?" He cleared his throat nervously. "What you've done, it's impressive," he began, and it was clear how difficult those words were for him. "To build a company like that, in your field, it's a huge achievement." "Thank you," was all I said. He shifted in his chair. "Listen, about what I said at dinner, about the will." "Dad," I stopped him, my voice soft but firm. "I don't need your money. I didn't come here for that. My being here has nothing to do with your will." A look of sincere, almost childlike confusion crossed his face. His entire coordinate system, built on money and inheritance, had collapsed. "Then, why?" he asked, and for the first time in years, his voice held no calculation, only bewilderment. His bewildered question was the most honest one I had heard from him in the last 5 years. It was more important than any discussion of money or business. "I came because, no matter what, you are my father, and this is my family," I answered. I hoped that over the years, something had changed. That we could build a relationship based on mutual respect, not on my silent agreement with your rules. He looked down at his calloused hands. "I have always respected you, Clara." "Really?" My voice was quiet but firm. "You called my dream a hobby. You refused to help with my education. You made it clear that the only path worthy of respect was my brother's path. A path that was closed to me simply because I was born a woman." He flinched at my directness. "Times were different. I just wanted to protect you." "From what?" "From success? From independence?" I finished for him. "You were afraid I would fail. 9 out of 10 of those companies go under." He exclaimed. "I didn't want you to get burned. But was it okay for me to suffer from your complete indifference?" I countered. What was it like to hear that my goals didn't matter? To watch the family's future being discussed as if I didn't exist in the room? This time, he had no answer. For the first time in my life, he wasn't arguing, defending himself, or giving orders. He was just silent, and in that silence, I saw him, perhaps for the first time, truly considering my words. He was silent for a long time before speaking again. "I built all of this myself, from scratch," he said quietly. "I believe that you should walk my own path," I finished for him. And I did. But there is a huge difference between giving someone freedom and pointedly turning your back on them, not believing in their ability. A heavy silence once again hung between us. "I'm proud of you, Clara," he finally forced out. "I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner." "Thank you, Dad," I replied, understanding what those 3 words had cost him. "But let me ask you something," I continued. "If my company were worth not 4 billion, but say, 4 million? Would we be sitting here talking like this now? Would you admit you were wrong?" He said nothing. And that silence was louder than any words. "That's the whole problem," I said as gently as I could. "Your approval was always a condition that had to be earned by meeting your standards. But it shouldn't be like that in a family." At that moment, he looked truly old, as if the weight of decades had settled on his shoulders. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. It was the first admission of powerlessness I had ever heard from him. "I don't know either," I admitted honestly. "But the fact that we both understand something needs fixing, that's a start. I don't expect everything to change in one night. I'm not even sure we can change everything," I continued. "But I'm willing to try to build something new." "And what would that look like?" he asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "It would start with you seeing me for who I am, not the daughter you imagined," I explained. "You would show interest in my work because it's important to me, not because it makes money. And you would acknowledge that my path is not the only right one." He nodded slowly. "I can try. That's all I ask," I said. "Let's both try." And in that moment, I realized something about myself. I had come here to seek reconciliation, but I wanted to do it from a position of strength, backed by my success. I had used my achievements in the exact same way he had always used his, as proof of being right. Perhaps we were more alike than I thought. "There's one more thing," I said, breaking the silence. "I've established a scholarship at my old high school. It's named after Miss Albright and will fully cover tuition for girls who want to study STEM fields." My father looked astonished. "That's very noble." "It's personal," I corrected him gently. "Miss Albright believed in me when no one else did. I want other girls to have that chance, even if they don't get it at home." He understood the implication and just nodded. "I should get back," I said, rising. As I reached the door, he called my name, "Clara." I turned around. He had stood up too, his posture uncharacteristically uncertain. "I'm sorry," he said, the word clearly foreign on his tongue. "For not seeing your potential. For making you feel less important than your brothers. You deserved better." It was an imperfect apology, delivered perhaps many years too late. But it was sincere. And that was enough to crack open a door that had been locked for a long time. "Thank you, Dad," I said simply. I walked out of the study, feeling as though a weight I had carried for years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. When I returned to the living room, it felt like I had entered a different house. The heavy tension that had hung in the air all evening had dissipated. Now, a light, lively atmosphere prevailed. My mother immediately came over, her eyes full of anxiety. "Well? What did he say?" she whispered. "We talked," I gently squeezed her hand. Probably for the first time in our lives, truly honestly. Relief washed over her face, but it was quickly replaced by an expression of guilt. "Come with me to the kitchen for a minute," she asked. In the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, not knowing how to begin. "Clara, I should have been on your side," she finally said. "All those years when your father was unfair, when he didn't believe in your dreams, when he refused to help. I was silent. I should have protected you. Mom, you..." I started, but she cut me off. "No. I was a good wife, as I was taught. But I wasn't a good enough mother. I was afraid to contradict him, and you paid the price for my fear. I'm so sorry, sweetheart." She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. "I want you to know. I have always been incredibly proud of you. Of your strength, your intelligence. When you left for Boston all by yourself, I was terrified, but at the same time, my heart was bursting with pride. I didn't know how to say it out loud." She wiped away a tear. You know, I have a secret. All these years, I've been collecting clippings. Any article online that mentioned you or your company. I printed everything and kept it in a special folder. Arthur doesn't know about it. I froze, stunned by her words. She hadn't just been watching from the sidelines. She had been my quiet, invisible ally. I'd love to see it, Mom, I whispered and hugged her tightly. When my mother and I returned to the living room, Mark approached me. He looked unusually serious and humble. Can we talk for a minute? He asked, nodding toward the back door. We stepped out onto the porch. The frosty December air was a pleasant relief after the stuffy room. We stood in silence, looking out at the backyard where we used to play as children. I need to apologize, he finally said, not looking at me. I acted like a complete jerk. I was a terrible brother. Mark, you don't have to. I began. Yes, I do, he said firmly. I went with the flow, took Dad's side, and never questioned him. I enjoyed his favoritism and never thought about how it affected you. But honestly, Clara, I've always admired you. Your willpower. The way you just left everything, moved away, and built something of your own from scratch. That takes incredible courage. His words were so sincere that I felt the ice that had been between us for years begin to melt. Thank you for saying that, Mark. It means a lot to me. And what you've created, it's amazing, he added. And I'm not talking about the money. Our business makes parts for machines. Your technology, it saves people's lives. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the clouds of our breath in the cold air. How's Noah? I asked, to change the subject. I noticed he's interested in technology. Mark smiled for the first time that evening, a genuine smile. He's obsessed with it. Takes after his aunt, it seems. He wants to major in computer science, and I don't even know what to advise him. Maybe you could. Of course, I readily replied. I'll talk to him, tell him about the opportunities. We could even arrange a summer internship for him at the company if he's interested. Really, his face lit up. Clara, that would be absolutely incredible. Thank you. The rest of the evening was a series of conversations I couldn't have dreamed of just a few hours earlier. The icy wall between me and my family had begun to crack. Even Ethan, my ever-pragmatic brother, found it in himself to have a real conversation with me. You know, I always thought you were just being stubborn, he admitted awkwardly. It never occurred to me that you were actually building something more worthwhile. Not more worthwhile, Ethan. Just different, I gently corrected him. Something that suits me. Later, Aunt Martha approached me. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you, she said quietly, her eyes tearing up. She also dreamed of having her own business, back in the 50s. But Grandpa said it was no work for a woman. She poured all her indomitable energy into community work. But I often wondered what she could have become if she'd had the same opportunities as you. These conversations, these fragments of family history I had never known, were healing in a way I hadn't expected. I realized that my success and money were merely the catalyst. They had forced my family to stop and look at me in a new light. But the real, profound changes were happening not in my bank account, but in their hearts. Toward the end of the evening, Noah found me. His eyes were shining. Aunt Clara, I have a million questions about artificial intelligence. Do you think I could maybe see how things work at your company sometime? His enthusiasm was contagious. Even better, Noah, I smiled. Come to Boston this summer. You can shadow our teams, see everything from the inside. Seriously, he was ecstatic. That would be a dream come true. It's a deal, I promised, making a mental note to discuss it with Mark and Megan later. This warm moment was interrupted by the sharp ring of my phone. The screen read Ava, my COO and best friend. Clara, sorry to bother you, her voice was tense. We have an emergency. The engineers from Nexus Corp made changes to our core algorithm without proper testing. 3 hospitals are reporting glitches. Consequences? I asked, my voice instantly becoming sharp. No threat to patients, but the system needs to be rolled back immediately, and their CTO is pushing back. Your voice is the deciding factor here. I'll be on a call in 20 minutes, I stated and ended the call. I quickly explained the situation to my mother. I have to leave urgently, a work emergency. Of course, dear, go, she said with understanding. But we'll see you before you head back to Boston? Definitely. We'll have breakfast tomorrow, I promised. The farewell this time was different. My nephews and niece hugged me, my mother held me tight, my brothers shook my hand with a respect I had never seen before. Even my father came over and gave me an awkward but sincere hug. We'll need to talk more, he said. Yes, I nodded, feeling a fragile hope begin to bloom. Driving away, I thought about the incredible turn the evening had taken. My success had been a form of shock therapy that forced everyone to face the truth. The money hadn't healed old wounds, no. But it had created an opportunity for it. There was a lot of work ahead, many difficult conversations. But for the first time in years, I felt that healing was possible. A year later, I was driving down the familiar road to Maple Creek again. But everything was different. Behind the wheel of my own lucid air, I no longer felt the need to hide. Last year's anxiety had been replaced by a quiet, cautious hope. 12 months had changed almost everything. Our relationships hadn't magically healed. It was a slow, sometimes awkward process of rebuilding trust, requiring effort from every one of us. But it was real. The biggest surprise was my father. A couple of weeks after that Christmas, he called to say he had started seeing a therapist. I was stunned. A man of his generation, admitting he needed help, it was unbelievable. I want to understand my mistakes, Clara, he had said. And I want to be better. And he wasn't just talking. He would call to ask thoughtful questions about my work. He sent me articles about women leaders in tech. He flew to Boston twice to see my office and meet my team, genuinely trying to understand my world. Changes had come to Hayes Industries as well. Ethan and Mark, now at the helm, began to change the old ways. They launched an internship program for women aspiring to leadership positions and created an entire IT department to modernize production. But their most significant decision was appointing my mother to the board of directors. They finally recognized that her quiet wisdom and years of experience were an invaluable asset. Seeing several cars in the driveway, I couldn't help but smile. This year, I wasn't the last to arrive. My mother met me at the door with open arms. Merry Christmas, sweetie. Come in, we have guests, and some of them you know very well. The living room was buzzing with conversation and laughter. But it wasn't just my family. I saw Ava, my COO, in a lively debate about something with Mark. 2 female engineers from my team were sitting on the couch with Mia, showing her a project on a laptop. And Noah, my nephew, was listening with shining eyes to our lead data analyst, who had mentored him during his summer internship. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined that my 2 worlds, family and work, could blend so simply and harmoniously in one room. My father approached me. He looked calm and rested, I almost didn't remember him like this. Merry Christmas, Clara, he said and gave me a hug, a real one this time. We're so glad you're here. We have some special news for you, but we'll save it for dinner. The dining table had to be extended to fit everyone, and I immediately noticed the main change. My father was no longer sitting at the head. He and my mother sat in the center, side by side, like partners. That gesture alone spoke volumes about how much our family had changed. The conversation flowed freely, about technology, business, life. There were no more forbidden topics. When dessert was served, my father stood up again, but this time there was no authority in his gesture. There was calm. I want to share some news about Hayes Industries, he began. Ethan and Mark have done an incredible job this year. But they've taught me something important. My own vision for the future was too narrow. Therefore, Today I want to announce the creation of the Hayes Innovation Fund. Its purpose is to support women who, like Clara, are building the future in technology and manufacturing. A surprised whisper went around the table. The fund will be managed by a board that will include Eleanor and Clara, as well as one of the women from our family, starting with Mia when she turns 18. We will direct 5% of the company's annual profits to the fund. I sat, unable to say a word. This wasn't just an apology. It was action. A real, systemic change. And secondly, my father continued, we are establishing the Albright Scholarship. Every year, it will fully cover the cost of college for 5 young women studying science, technology, or business. I met my mother's gaze across the table. She was beaming. Her pride held everything, joy for my father, and the awareness of her own role in these changes. Over the past year, she had found her voice, and its strength had made our whole family better and healthier. The house was filled with life. Mia proudly showed me her first program on her laptop. Noah talked excitedly about his plans to apply to the country's top computer science programs. Even Ethan and Mark were having a lively but friendly debate about the future of AI in manufacturing. The old rivalry had given way to healthy competition. My mother came over to me, her face glowing with happiness. This, she said quietly. This is what I always wanted. For us to be truly together, not just sitting at the same table. I looked around the room, where my two worlds had mixed, my family by blood and my family by choice, which I had created in my company. There was a deep, quiet sense of peace in my soul. The journey here had been long and painful, but it had led us to healing. My success had opened the door, but we were only able to walk through it thanks to hard work on ourselves, honesty, forgiveness, the ability to listen. I finally understood that my true worth was never measured by a line in the Forbes list. It was in being true to myself, in creating something that helps people, and in the strength to forgive hurts that would have been so easy to hold on to for years. Later, as we all gathered for a family photo, I looked at their happy faces and thought that true wealth isn't what you can count. It's what you build together with the people you love.